Jigme Tamsha Gyatso, at the very beginning in the first paragraph, Jigme Tamsha Gyatso approves of his near contemporary, so 20th century, Shoma Gintu Gyatso's opinion on how emptiness comes to mean dependent arising. And Jigme Tamsha Gyatso cites only the last sentence. So what's so good about Jigme Tamsha Gyatso is he points to what I should look at. Hey, Jeffrey, you ought to look at Shoma Gintu Gyatso. All right? So you ought to look at Shoma Gintu Gyatso. And Shoma Gintu Gyatso, it turns out, is criticizing something that is in Ngawandashi, who was contemporary with Giant Sheba. He was Giant Sheba's chief student at that time. And as you remember, and I like to bring it up, Ngawandashi was somebody who tried to commit suicide. He put a noose around his neck and hanged himself. And Giant Sheba came and I don't know if he himself cut him down. One would think he would have had to do it himself. But Giant Sheba probably had one or two people trailing after him whenever he went to somebody's room. And anyway, whether Ngawandashi had to be cut down, or whether a couple of people got a hold of Ngawandashi and they just were able to lift off the noose. He was enough in the noose that he was left with the rest of his life with a burn on his neck. And to show you how open that monk society was, this person with a burn on his neck, and everybody saying, he tried to hang himself. This person, Ngawandashi, became Giant Sheba's chief student. All right? Not because they felt sorry for him. If they felt sorry for him, he'd end up in a corner in Giant Sheba's room when Giant Sheba was teaching. And, he would be favored, but not favored to become his best student. Because you had to become best student by the force of your intellect. It really says something, and that's why I bring it up. Farmers' kids became the best. Not only that, somebody who tried to hang himself. That disgrace, that didn't become a disgrace that kicked you out. Never mind that. If you were smart enough, you could rise to the top. And as I've mentioned, even Tsongkhapa's texts were criticized like anybody else's texts by people like Jizan Trikki Gensen, really, without the flowery graces that came to be later used as, the disguises that later people like Giant Sheba and so forth use. Not flowery, but disguises. But still, the disguises are very rough. You know that Giant Sheba is saying, I can do this better than he could. And teachers let you know he's fixing up Tsongkhapa. But earlier, people were openly fixing up what the so-called boss had to say. This is I emphasize this because a lot of people just say that those following Tsongkhapa are just parroting him, just repeating it. This is idiocy. We're beset by idiots. You say it bothers me a bit. These people are called scholars who say this. They haven't penetrated even the super surface. Okay, I've blown my top enough on that one. So Ngaondashi, there's something to criticize in Ngaondashi. And we're going to go through all the steps of a very nice presentation and get to the last step. So, what we want to get at, there's some little thing that Jigme Tamsha Gyatso adds at the end. But Shama Ginna Gyatso has a very nice presentation. And in his presentation, there's a criticism of Ngaondashi. It's not that everything Ngaondashi says is a mistake. So there's some little thing in it. So you got to look at Ngaondashi to get all this good stuff, and then some little mistake at the end, according to Shamagen Gyatso. And then I didn't get to read today what Jigme Tamsha Gyatso is adding at the end. And I don't know, I forgot, even though I wrote this chapter, if actually Shamagen Gyatso has a mistake at the end, and then Jigme Tamsha Gyatso is going to add a little bit. Okay? So, don't get the idea that all of what Ngaondashi says is a mistake. So, a good presentation of Shamagen Gyatso is got to of Jigme Tamsha Gyatso requires presenting Shamagen Gyatso, requires presenting Ngaondashi, which requires presenting Tsongkhapa. And you all, because you're all on the ball, looked up Tsongkhapa to get your background, which we started with. And so we're drawing the circle and going deeper on Tsongkhapa. That's where we're at. Whew. Oh, and I got through a good part of this, almost to the end, almost up to Jigme Tamsha Gyatso. And when I got to that point, I said, wow! I was really, this is good. Oh, I'm seeing things. And went and had lunch. I'm a full stomach explainer. Try to explainer. All right. Now, one thing I want to say about the debate mode of procedure is that what we do when we debate is when we're the person who's standing up, we say something to the other person. And if the other person says, why, we shove that down the other person's throat, which is really nasty. But if in ordinary conversation you became somebody like this, it would be taken as quite nasty. Why? Why? I'm explaining the word why in debate. Why means would be better done as no it's not. Why means no it's not in debate. Right, Kimbo? Why means no it's not. So if you said to me, why? And I said, no, it's not. And I shoved that down your throat. Back to you. You said to me, I said something to you. Yeah. And then I accused you of saying, no, it's not. Why means no. That's really odd. It would be like teaching bad manners, teaching you to be rude. Or if a child came to the parent and the parent had said something, taught something, and the child said, why? And you took that as a no. This is the bane of being a parent. The child is constantly saying why, and it really pisses you off. Not that I've ever been a parent. I was the one saying why. Why? 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 And if the parent was the kind of person who said, why are you saying no? But it's just that the format of it is combative. The format of it is combative. So the word why means I'm taking issue with you. Okay. That's the way the game is played. It's in, okay, why means no. Now, I've tried to think of, in ordinary conversation, do we have in our ordinary conversation, quite often, people answer no, even when they agree with you. No, that's the way I look at it too. What? You said no? Why did you say no before you agreed with me? No. Now listen when people agree with you. Agree or disagree, they say begin with no. You'll find somebody. No. Yeah, I often think that way too. It's sort of off-putting. But then we also say, why don't you go to the store and buy a bunch of grapes for everybody? Buy grapes for everybody. Why don't you? We say, why don't you? You're putting people on the defensive. Almost everybody says that. I tried to give it up. And in fact, I get like this whenever I hear anyone saying it to me or to anybody. Because I've given up saying it. I don't say, why don't you? I say, how about going to Salem and seeing if anyone sells kumquats. What's a kumquat? Don't you know what kumquat means? Doesn't anyone know what? Why don't you eat? Why don't? Why do we say why don't? Put people a little bit not questioning you, they're questioning themselves. Whereas if you say, how about, then they'll question you. Why are you thinking this? Why really? Can you cut out saying why don't? Why don't we go to There's a little bit of it, but this is structured in. Somebody says why, and you take that, oh, You think the opposite. You're accused of thinking the opposite. But it's just structured that way. It's a interesting, it's just how to say it ain't that way. Okay, anyway, I'm not justifying it. It's just the way it is, the way it's done. The other one that's odd in Tibet, this saying, it follows that. As far as I know, in Sanskrit texts, it follows that is only used for absurd statements. In Sanskrit texts, it follows that. It means it absurdly follows that. But in Tibetan texts, it follows that can be used for our own opinions, or it absurdly follows that. Thus, when we translate it, if it means it absurdly follows, we put absurdly in brackets. And because of this fact, one of my Tibetan teachers said that Sanskrit texts do not have the equivalent of it follows that. And this is manifestly, countered by the fact that Nagarjuna himself has a special term for it absurdly follows that. What Sanskrit doesn't have, according to me, my reading of Sanskrit is not vast. Nagarjuna has, when he wants to say it absurdly follows, he's got a separate verb. Okay, that's all. I'm not here to teach debate. It's just that we're reading a debate text. Okay. We're at the point where we left off last time. Because, and I'll jump right in the middle, an awareness ascertaining a pot ascertains that which is bulbous, flat-bottomed, and able to hold fluid. That's the whole definition. And you have asserted that those two, that is, now you've got to read through this. Please read through, try to follow in your prep sessions with each other, work these out. All he's doing is explaining the background of what's going on in Tsongkhapa's statement down below. If you get into what Tsongkhapa's saying, using a different mode of speech, mode of interaction. It's like, okay. If you assert, next sentence, that in an awareness ascertaining a pot as it's been arising, also ascertains the pot's emptiness of true establishment. Now remember, when we were going over this in Tsongkhapa's statement, that in fact is what we want. What we want is to get to a point where, if we're ascertaining a pot as it's been arising, we want to We want this to prompt an awareness ascertaining upon emptiness through establishment, right? Do you get it? We want that. But you can't say that if we know, for instance, that our abbot here, who has a vast mind, such that if 3 or 4 years ago you folks at Travesty finished one huge building, here it's 5 years later, she wants to build another building. You know, she announces, hey, in her language, I'm going to tease her now, why don't we build an even bigger building to do what? What's the current project? You're raising funds, right?
Buddha Hall.
What hall?
The Buddha Hall.
Buddha Hall. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Buddha Hall.
Yeah.
Why don't we build? She puts you on the defensive. Why don't we? Now,
Excuse me, sir.
who would be nasty enough to think, oh, nobody wants a Buddha Hall. You know, the reasons against? Whereas if she said, how about building a Buddha Hall? And you would immediately come, you know, when she brought that up, you were shuddering, right, inside? You know, you had plenty of reasons not to.
Well, Tarver, you shuddered? No, you said yippee.
You shuddered. Why? Because you immediately thought, that's a dependent arising. We would have to bring in all those carpenters, right? Carpenters, etc., and so forth. Now, you didn't immediately think, when you thought that's a dependent, we have to bring in carpenters and people to dig the hole for the foundation, would have to bring in do this, all these causes. You didn't immediately ascertain emptiness just because you thought it was dependent arising. Right?
You did. For the banking. Emptiness of the bank account.
Oh, the emptiness of the bank account. It's not that kind of emptiness. We ain't got no moolah. So you see, she's thinking all the work. We're going to raise the money. Where are we going to get the money? Now, if you raised all those things, you know, so why don't we? You would think, we can't say those things. You would think, you know, another way to put it is, we're lazy. She would think we're lazy. And she would have to say, we overcame all that laziness 18 times before. You know, we did this, we did that, and you would all go to sleep while she was rehearsing these 18 different things, okay? All right. So you see why it says the reflecting on dependent arising doesn't necessarily cause realization of emptiness. All right. Very clear. But we can't let that, you know, that's like feeling, not that's like, we shouldn't feel there's no way that reflecting on dependent arising would prompt realization of emptiness, you see? And even the way this is worded is dependent on somebody's thinking, there's no way that could happen. No, that's not the point here. There is a way, but what is it? what is it? And that's the point. What is it? That's all that's being said here as it goes down through these red steps. And it's, wow, it's a way of pounding this home, these red steps. Which, of course, when you're midway through building the Buddha Hall, and she says, she's picked up my technique, and she says, what about building and she just goes like this. And doesn't finish out the rest of the sentence for quite some time. Anyway, yeah.
The circus says about building, why don't you build a tool shed?
Oh yeah, a tool shed like you've never seen. So that we can have all these things ready for the next project. We don't have to call people in. Call them, have them bring in their tools. Yeah, then, because according to you, an awareness ascertaining a part has been arising, ascertains a part's emptiness of true establishment, which is ridiculous. We know from our own experience, it doesn't automatically work that way. It was sort of the reason that an awareness, can you catch up with me? An awareness ascertaining a part has been arising, ascertaining this part's emptiness of true existence. That's why it's red. But there's got to be a way for you cannot accept that an awareness ascertaining the part is produced is ascertains the part's emptiness of true establishment. You cannot accept, because Tsongkhapa himself says, but still, there's going to be a way. Okay.
No, that one it's not, because an awareness ascertaining dependent arising induces an awareness ascertaining.
Right. Could induce for somebody who's already realized emptiness. Could.
But one awareness doesn't ascertain both dependent arising and emptiness.
Right. It's serial.
Yeah.
And then
it's explained as if one has consciousness ascertained.
Yes. Right.
That's what all the red is marked. Yeah.
So the latitude, no, so there's the quote from Tsongkhapa, then the latitude reasons, and then very nicely the translation puts in brackets what the latitude reasons are. The emptiness of true establishment of a pot. So, pot, it just gets tiresome, always a pot. But anyway, that's the fill-in, But it's better than X, isn't it? X is not the meaning expressed by the phrase expressing that a pot is to been rising. But that's what you want to get to, right? You want to get to the point where the one prompts. You know, you hear it. You hear a pot or a house or a new building is a dependent arising. You want that to prompt. You know, in the 5th grade, I've told you, the teacher taught us about cause and effect, and I wish I could tell you that prompted my reflection on emptiness. In that case, it didn't. But I was thrilled by the teaching of cause and effect, at least that. But in that case, I can't claim anything more. And it's not taken to be an object of mode of apprehension of awareness ascertaining. So terms and awarenesses, these are the two things. A term expressing and an awareness ascertaining. Two things. Phrase expressing. But now, interesting, it goes on, you know, 1 or 2 lines, because the phrase expressing that a pot is a dependent arising does not express either explicitly or implicitly. Now this seems to be where Geltsop got in trouble. A pot's emptiness of true establishment, blah, blah, blah. And then in awareness ascertaining, I'm a little bit surprised that the term explicitly or implicitly is used with a phrase. Okay. A phrase expressing does not express either explicitly or implicitly. Well, I suppose, yes. When we say something, when we say something, well, that person is not very nice, you know, and you're loading what you're expressing. So implicitly, you're getting across a point. So the same thing with the awareness, of course. But that's Gyaltsab is saying implicitly is conveyed. Because that's what he remembered Tsongkhapa as saying. All right, then there's the quote from Tsongkhapa. So then, of course, the person in the street, people say the man in the street, let's say the woman in the street, says, draws a conclusion from that. Apat's emptiness of true establishment, is not the meaning of Apat's dependent arising. Now, of course, the focal thing said earlier, this is a spin-off, that Apat's emptiness of true establishment is the meaning of Apat's dependent arising. Now, you knocked it down 3 ways, and the person's concluding, well, if it's not any of those 3, then the emptiness of true establishment can't be the meaning of dependent arising. And of course the answer is, it is the meaning, but some other way than those 3. And the response is, no. There's a way. So now if there's going to be a trick from our side, remember Songpa was talking to Gyaltsab, who's at his feet, and Songpa had 5 ways, wasn't it? Not 3, but 5. When he was talking, if Gyaltsab was accurate, he had 5. And now Songpa's bending down to him a little bit and saying, now I'm going to tell you where it's at. Now I'm going to give you the true way. And this is really, it's great. I told you what you might think it was, even if some of them were silly. Now here's where it's at. Re-rendered around 1700 by Nyawandashi. Although the emptiness of true existence, this is in the because clause, is the meaning of dependent arising, it's going, very literal, droa, which really in Tibetan is groa, or groa. Going. Groa, or droa, pronounced droa nowadays, or groa. You see, it's a GRO, or groa. There's a linguist in Europe who, maybe it's 15, 20 years ago now, I heard about him. He wanted to group Tibetan as an Indo-European language. I heard about him. The word for many is mang. I don't know how he built his case. Anyway. Although the emptiness of true existence is the meaning of dependent arising, it's going as the meaning of dependent arising, is for proponents of the middle who have completed analysis of the view. Now, you can see there's going to be discussion along the ages up till today. What does it mean to have completed analysis of the view? Does it mean you've realized emptiness, or more than that? But it's not for all who have ascertained dependent arising with valid cognition. Now, obviously, ascertained dependent arising with valid cognition does not mean all the implications of dependent arising. All the implications of dependent arising would mean that you know it requires emptiness, really, right? Implications. Now, if you know that to build the tool hall, she's thinking of a tool hall, really, not just a tool shed. You know, everything in its proper place, etc. the depth of what she's thinking. This will require realizing emptiness. Not okay. Although the emptiness meaning is going to the meaning, you see, you can start reading these things fast because you're just repeating the reason clause. That although the emptiness of true existence, the meaning of dependent arising, it's going as the meaning of this, that is said dependent arising. This burns the middle of complete analysis of the view. Following me? Yes. No? Get on board during the week. During the week, don't let anything pass by. Ask your neighbor. No question is stupid. But it's not for all who have vacillating dependent arising without cognition. Follows. You see that word follows? That doesn't mean absurdly follows. It's blue or purple, however you see colors. I mean, that's certainly blue or purple, somewhere in between. Because in the speech of the foremost second conqueror, a lot of people on our team prefer Victor. I don't know why. I mean, even I've switched to Victor. Well, she's nodding her head. Come on, Jeffrey, come on board, she's saying. Victor, conqueror, conqueror. In the more subtlest way. What?
The Mexicans don't like conqueror.
Oh, yeah.
Conquistadores.
Yeah.
And
Those,
likes that
the
association.
dirty bastards. What you've conquered over, I'm going to kind of push this down her throat. Don't tell her that's what I'm doing. Because you've conquered over, in the subtle way, you've conquered over the three subtle minds that precede the innermost mind, the extremely subtle mind of clear light. So the mind of the vivid white, the vivid red or orange, and the vivid black mind. White, red, orange, black minds. So in the Highest Yoga Tantra Guhya Samaja system, what you've conquered over, what you're victorious over, are these three, the most subtle obstructions. Of course, the obstructions to liberation from cyclic existence and the obstructions to omniscience. That's what you're victorious over, conquered over, whatever the word is. In Tibetan, Jom. Whatever word, Victor, conquered. Conquered to the point where they've disappeared and won't reemerge. And you can use the wind on which the extremely subtle mind of clear light rides to appear in form. Unlike in Sankhya, Sankhya doesn't speak of such. In Sankhya, you have to devolve in order to reappear. So, as we saw in the three principal aspects of the path, and then in the praise of dependent arising, also called the shorter or lesser sounds a little demeaning. It's not at all demeaning. The shorter, smaller, shorter. Essence of eloquence. It's sort of funny not to be able to come up with the term of the book I'm spending so much time on.